Because, you know, if you have, like, let's say one of the normal presidents walk in. We've had a lot of normals. And some great ones. You'd have, what, 300 people show up.
President Trump tonight in Ohio, a state that has given us 8 U.S. presidents, reminding the crowd at his rally that he is, shall we say, different from other presidents. Trump also spent a fair amount of time offering up his take on a story about Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant of Ohio. Here is just a part of that.
And one day, it was looking really bad. And Lincoln just said, "You," hardly knew his name. And they said, "Don't take him. He's got a drinking problem." And Lincoln said, "I don't care what problem he has. You guys aren't winning." And his name was Grant, General Grant. He started to win. Grant really did. He had a serious problem, a serious drinking problem. But man, was he a good general. And he's finally being recognized as a great general. But Lincoln had almost developed a phobia because he was having a hard time with a true great fighter and a great general, Robert E. Lee. But Grant figured it out.
Grant's finally being recognized as a good general. We are so lucky to have the perfect person to get to the bottom of this story with us tonight, NBC News presidential historian Michael Beschloss. And we have the very best news for patriots and lovers of American history alike, and that is that Michael's new book is out, the result of years of work on his part. It is called Presidents of War. It is now available wherever you buy books. Michael, I know he didn't get that story out of one of your books because I've read them all. What do you make of who's talking to him, and what did you make of what we just heard?
I think I'm glad at least he's talking about a historical figure. It's not quite the way it happened. And I think maybe Grant was recognized a little bit in the past, not just these days.
Yes, I had heard his name before.
Once or twice. I think we've even discussed him.
I'm on page 526, which is this much book. And thank you for this book. I'm enjoying it thoroughly.
Delighted.
Let's talk about presidential power and the right to start or escalate, if not the right, the ability to start or escalate a conflict, and what I know to be your concern right now in 2018.
Well, the idea of the founders was that it should be done by Congress in a war declaration. Haven't been any of those since 1942. Presidents can, in a way, get involved into wars, in wars almost single-handedly and almost overnight. And my worry is, with a modern president, and Donald Trump is president, that he may be tempted at some point to lurch toward war because he knows that that can help a president who has an election ahead of him. In 2011, 2012, President Trump, before he was president, would tweet predicting that Barack Obama would start a war in order to get elected in 2012. Very bad idea for a president to be thinking that way.
As luck would have it, this last page I read last night, 526, has a vignette, a scene, Johnson's meeting with Eisenhower. Interestingly, JFK always referred to Ike as general because as Supreme Allied Commander, JFK, a young Navy man, served under Dwight David Eisenhower in World War II. Johnson's talking to Ike about the problem he's having in Vietnam. Ike says, by the way, be willing to use whatever weapons you have, hit them from the air, including but not limited to tactical nuclear weapons. And I'm thinking, what is it that leaves these presidents hardened by war? What do they have in common? What's the after effect? Anything shared by all of them?
Well, you know, you've gone exactly to the essence as usual, Brian. As you know, this book is about 9 presidents who were involved in major wars all the way back to 1807. And there are a lot of things that they do have in common. A lot of them have emotional breakdowns. They almost all have strong wives. They almost all turn to religion. Lincoln, for instance, late in the Civil War, met an old friend of his who was surprised that he'd become so religious. And Lincoln said, I don't know how you could get through the traumas of war without being religious. Lady Bird Johnson told me that during the days of the Vietnam War, she thought that her husband, Lyndon, might become a Catholic.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.